In today's video, I'm gonna be looking at an article and some research which suggests that physicists, scientists, quote unquote, have solved the big problem of consciousness. They've tackled the hard issue of consciousness. And now, while personally do not believe this is the case, and I'm gonna be arguing why in just a second, they, however, have made a huge contribution to the study of consciousness, to scientific study of consciousness. And this is that consciousness, they're acknowledging that consciousness is not in the brain. It cannot arise in the brain, it cannot be found in the brain. And now for scientists to say this after living in the material dogmatic view of the world, that everything is hard science, everything is physical, for scientists to come with this conclusion, we're taking a huge step in the right direction to truly understand what's going on here. Naturally, this brings a huge question into the table, which is, if consciousness is not found in the brain, then where is it? Is science giving way to a metaphysical aspect of reality? I go a little bit into it in the video, and I start talking about this pragmatic philosophy that I've been talking about as I go into the idea that while we are doing this research on the brain, on neuroscience and consciousness, we are actually sort of reverse engineering technology that we do not understand, that we did not create, but merely inhabit. Before I move forward, I would like to remind you that if you want to join the growing discussion on consciousness and would like to be notified on the latest scientific discoveries and theories surrounding this topic and how they connect to ancient mythologies and philosophies, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, as I'll try to upload at least one video per week as I continue with the outline. Alright, so in today's video, as I mentioned, I'm gonna be going into this article. The name of the article is "A New Theory in Physics Claims to Solve the Mystery of Consciousness." This article has been going around in the last few months, August 11, 2022. Right now, as of making of this video, is September 2022, so this is very recent research. And as I said, there are a lot of neurotechnologies and software that what they do is they just switch some words around and they recreate the same article over and over and over. They post it in different blogs. This is something a little bit sad, to be honest. It's bad for journalism, but I try to find the best ones, and all of them sort of shift the title with things like "Physicists solve the hard problem of consciousness," "Physicists claim to solve the mystery," and so on and so forth. This one says "A new theory in physics," which is a little bit more accurate, claims to solve the mystery of consciousness, the hard problem of consciousness. I'm gonna go into it in a little bit, but TLDR, they do not solve the mystery of consciousness. The mystery of consciousness has been going on for a while now, and it's, as I think today, is the biggest issue in science and philosophy. And as I've been doing this channel, the research of this is connecting into things that go beyond the basic idea of consciousness. They have to do with the UFO phenomenon, they have to do with the afterlife, they have to do with out-of-body experiences, they have to do with psychedelics, and so on and so forth. The ultimate reality and the very possibility that we might be living in some sort of people call it a simulation, a virtual reality, something of that nature. So it's beyond consciousness, beyond the conscious experience, and I'm gonna be going into this. So even though they do not solve the mystery of consciousness as they claim, they do pose some very good insights into the topic of consciousness, especially and most importantly, as it says here in the summary, these are scientists with a new theory, with equations, with a published research, which I'm going to be going a little bit into in just a second here. And the main conclusion is that consciousness cannot simply be reduced to neural activity alone, researchers say. So the whole idea that they're saying is that we cannot find consciousness in the brain. And they have now the equations. They have a very complex philosophical way to understand this. Might go into it a little bit, but I'm gonna offer my own, which is something I want to do with this project, a rational divine outline, to offer a more pragmatic and philosophy, an easier philosophy that is digestible and that is a little bit more objective instead of subjective and complex. I want it to be objective and easy. This is my main thing that I want to do here. So yeah, some initial thoughts that I want to put out before I go into this is, as I said, the conclusion is the scientists acknowledge that consciousness, not in the brain does not create our conscious experience. Consciousness is not the neural activity, it's not the brain reacting, it's the subjective part of the qualia. The subjective part of the experience is very important, and philosophy can help in that. And we cannot look at consciousness as an entirely physical thing. So the fact that scientists are acknowledging this, and they have posed the theory, and they have equations, and they are posing it right in front of everyone, is something very amazing, and it's a step forward in the whole research of consciousness. Alright, so as I've been saying all throughout these videos and ongoing research, this is a blog site, Neuroscience News. I found it that it's a little bit easier to navigate because it has big letters and big spaces. There are at least 5 other sites. There's a bunch of sites that just recycle the same article and go on and go on. But there are links to the actual study, which I'm going to be linking below. In this article, a relativistic theory of consciousness. I'm going to go a little bit into it, not too much, because then it gets really complicated. And if you're really interested in all of this, you can go through it. You can go through the mathematical equations to how the scientists are posing their theory, but it's much more simple than it all seems. And I'm gonna go into the simpler way into looking at all of this. There's also the Eureka Alert article that I'm gonna be linking below as well. If anybody wants a little bit more of a formal article, which is fair, this is a good site to find these articles. But I'm just gonna be going into this, which is the same. They're basically the same, just change a few words and so on. Alright, so the article starts going into the idea of how do 1.4 kilograms of brain tissue create thoughts, feeling, mental images, and inner world. This is qualia. Thoughts, feelings, mental images, and the inner world. The color red, how do we interpret the subjective part of consciousness? How is it created in this brain tissue? How does it... We cannot open the brain and look at a mental... This is the whole problem of consciousness. To make it easy, and I've spoken about this before, is you cannot open a brain and open the little fibers in the brain and look at a mental image. You cannot pull out a feeling out of there. Where are these feelings? Where is the subjective experience? We do not know. Now, this starts tying with some other theories on the non-physical. When we think about a metaphysical existence and the possibility of a metaphysical existence, then it's not that complicated. And there's some research in it, but it's not right now. So the ability of the brain to create consciousness has baffled some for millennia. The mystery of consciousness lies in the fact that each of us has subjectivity, the subjectivity of the conscious experience. Something that is like the sense, feel, and think. It comes to being under anesthesia and dreamless deep sleep, as I've been saying before. This is connected to delta brain waves. I made a video on this. Now, I'm going to be making a video soon about this. And one thing is that we don't remember that we having some sort of a dream while we're in this stage of quote-unquote dreamless sleep. Another thing is that we don't dream. So the idea is that we're so far disconnected from our brain that it doesn't record anything. But does this mean that we're not dreaming? This is why it's hard for memory to understand, to recall our dreams sometimes, because it doesn't seem to be happening fully in the brain, which is something that I've been talking about. It seems that through the psychedelic experience, through the near-death experience, our brain is acting like a filter. And when people are going through these experiences, they are a little bit more detached from this brain filter than in conscious experience, which is why they have these wild things, which means that perhaps the transcendental experience, these other types of experiences are happening outside of the brain. Now I'm gonna link the research on this from Christopher Timmerman, looking into the psychedelic breakthrough, what they call a breakthrough, which is when people talk to aliens or see God and so on and so forth. What's happening in the brain is they're going into the delta wave state, which is the slower brain waves that can occur, which means that there is little activity. I've been going on this on and on and on, and which is also what is found during these quote unquote dreamless deep sleep. So I'm gonna link it somewhere on the screen. I'm gonna go into this in the future. This is important. Okay, continuing. While we're awake, we don't live in the dark. We experience the world and ourselves, but how the brain creates the conscious experience and what area of the brain is responsible for this remains a mystery. We don't know how the brain creates consciousness, and this is some of the issues that we have in science. People think we know everything. We don't know this. And then recently I made a video about how memory recollection actually works, how it seems to work, and some neuroscientists going with the idea that there is not a specific part in the brain where memories are stored. We don't go into stored memories and pull them out from a specific part of the brain. That is more of a metaphor, which is what they say in the actual study. I'm gonna link it on the screen. There's a study attached, as I said, every video on ongoing research in this playlist in a Rational Divine Outline is gonna have a published study attached to it. Within the study, this is what they're saying. This is more of a metaphor, and what seems to be happening with memory recollection is that, or memory accessing, is that we encode these memories at a cellular, molecular, synaptic, and circuit level. It's the whole thing. When we go into a memory, we relive the whole thing. Our brain creates these neural connections again, and then they add new ones, and with our experiences, with imagination, and so on and so forth. And this article, this research actually goes a little bit into it, and how we create these neural connections where we're thinking, where we're having this quote unquote conscious experience. Okay, so according to Dr. Nir Lahal, physicist from Bar Ilan University in Israel, this is quite a mystery, since it seems that our conscious experience cannot arise from the brain, and in fact cannot arise from any physical process. So this is, as I said, this is one of the main things to take from this research and from these articles, is that scientists are coming forward. Now, I've been getting a lot of negative comments sometimes in my work and so on and so forth. They're saying, "Oh, this is just absolute nonsense," and so on. This is neuroscience news. This is published research in Frontiers in Psychology. These are scientists which are coming forward and are posing the idea that consciousness cannot be found in the brain nor in a physical process. So where can we find consciousness if it's not in a physical process? Well, it might be in the existence of a metaphysical realm or place or somewhere else that is not physical. So this is, as I said, pummeling with a sledgehammer on the materialist outlook on life, on the scientific dogma. And this is very, very important. As I said, this is why I'm making this video. This is very, very important, even though they did not actually solve the mystery of consciousness. I'm gonna be going into it why in just a second, but this is the most important thing that they're bringing, and this is something that we all should be looking at. As strange as it sounds, the conscious experience in our brain cannot be found or reduced to some neural activity. Okay, so before I keep moving on with this article, something I want to point out is that this research paper was a collaboration of a physicist, Dr. Nir Lahal, and a philosopher, Dr. Zachariah Nima. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly, but this is huge because this is the acknowledgement that philosophy can contribute to the study of consciousness. So if we go to the actual publication here, it is stated right here. So given that the first person cognitive frame of reference also offers legitimate observations on consciousness, basically based on what they were talking about here, we conclude by arguing that philosophers can usefully contribute to the science of consciousness by collaborating with neuroscientists to explore the neural basis of phenomenal structure. So I'm going to be going into it a little bit. The neural basis, which is what the the scientists see, the correlation in the brain with the phenomenal structures, the phenomenon of consciousness, the subjective experience. So what we can find is the correlation of these. What is consciousness? Is it the neural basis? Is it what we see in the brain? Is it the neural activity? Or is it the actual subjective experience, the phenomenon of consciousness? Looking at the color red, it's both of them, but one is the physical basis, the classical physics, and the other one is a subjective experience. So what they're saying here is that we can usefully contribute as philosophers to the science of consciousness, putting the two together. And this is something that I want to do with this project, with a Rational Divine Outline, is putting the philosophy and the science together to bring about a new theory of everything, if we may. Okay, so Dr. Zachariah Nime, sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, says, think about it this way. To the whole thing, as strange as it sounds, the conscious experience in our brain cannot be found or reduced to some neural activity. What he's saying is, think about it this way. A philosopher from the University of Memphis: when I feel happiness, my brain will create a distinctive pattern of complex neural activity. This neural pattern will perfectly correlate with my conscious feeling of happiness, but it is not my actual feeling. It's just a neural pattern that represents my happiness. That's why a scientist looking at my brain and seeing this pattern should ask me what I feel, because the pattern is not the feeling itself, just a representation of it. As a result, we can't reduce the conscious experience of what we sense, feel, and think to any brain activity. We can just find correlations to these experiences. This is what I've been saying for a long time, and this is the main issue of consciousness. So when I did that video of magnetoencephalography, where I am saying that the technology and modern science is proving the existence of perhaps a larger network of consciousness, perhaps our consciousness protruding outside our skull and putting all that information out there. Perhaps in this metaphysical, this non-physical realm that these guys are insinuating to, because if it's not in the physical, where can we find consciousness? Perhaps in the metaphysical. So what magnetoencephalography does is that it picks up the electromagnetic field of the brain without touching the brain, without touching anything of you. It just reads the electromagnetic field and it recreates the image. It knows exactly the information that is happening in your brain. So a lot of people were saying, oh, this is not thoughts, because I was looking at the correlation with this electromagnetic field and thought, because this is what they were studying this by having people look at brands of ketchup. So they would see the colors, they would see the shape, they would have a mental process in it, and they would be able to pick it up. So what is this? What is the information that we're receiving? Is the conscious process of looking at brands, of feeling emotions, of looking at the colors. That's the conscious process, and the thing is picking it up. Some people were saying in the counter argument, they were saying, oh, these are not thoughts. This is just the electromagnetic field of the brain. What's the difference then? This was the main argument that I was going into in my previous video. Then what is it? This is the feeling. This is not my actual feeling. This is the neural activity. It perfectly correlates with a feeling. It's just a neural pattern. But the actual feeling is the happiness that Dr. Zachariah here is talking about. So is consciousness the actual subjective experience? Is consciousness the brands of ketchup and the emotions that the person is having? Or is it the electromagnetic field that protrudes outside of our skull with our thoughts? Is it the neural activity that the MRI picks up? What is consciousness? Is it the physical thing? Is it the metaphysical thing? Is it the objective thing? Is it the subjective thing? Or is it both of them at the same time? And we cannot reduce it to one or the other. We cannot reduce the conscious experience, what we sense, feel, and think, to the brain activity, to the electromagnetic field. We can just find the correlations to these experiences. Alright, so the article goes forward. After more than 100 years of neuroscience, we have very good evidence that the brain is responsible for the creation of our conscious abilities. Now, does it? Do we know that the brain is responsible for the creation of a conscious? This is why sometimes these articles are a little bit sketchy. I think the article here is contradicting itself. the author here, no, we don't know. We don't have this very good evidence the brain is responsible for the creation of conscious abilities. This is what the scientists are saying in the research that you are making an article of. They're saying that one thing is the brain, one thing is the neural activity, one thing is the brain just showing and flashing in certain areas, another thing is the conscious experience. So the brain is not responsible for the creation of the conscious abilities. This is a thing, I think it's a misconception in the article. It's a little bit of a contradiction here, so I just wanted to bring that out. So how could it goes on? So how could it be that these conscious experiences, and now they contradict themselves here, so how could it be that these conscious experiences can't be found anywhere in the brain or in the body and can't be reduced to any neural complex activity? Yeah, this is what the research is suggesting. We cannot find any of these conscious experiences. So the conscious abilities, so I think they're talking about conscious abilities and conscious experience. The conscious ability perhaps is just cognition and basic cognitive function. Perhaps the conscious experience is the actual subjective experience of consciousness, the color red and the taste of chocolate, the mental images, so on and so forth. I'm not sure what they're saying here, but this is the important thing. So how could it be? This is what we used to think from 100 years of neuroscience, that the brain creates everything. So how could it be that the conscious experience cannot be found anywhere in the brain or in the body and can be reduced to any neural complex activity? Now, I find this, thing in parentheses, or in the body, we cannot find anywhere. Can we? So the orchestrated objective reduction from Pernes and Hameroff, what they're saying is that we encode this quantum information in some specific cells in the brain. And at the moment of that, all this information just releases outside of us into the universe. So we're talking about information. I've been going on this on and on and on. So perhaps is it anywhere in the brain? Is it in the body? In the previous videos, I said I linked all the links. I'm gonna link things on the screen, but sometimes I don't have as many links. So all the related research and videos that I've made on this, I'm gonna be linked below. So in the previous video I was talking about how memory is encoded at the cellular, molecular, synaptic and circuit level and not in a specific region in the brain. So we are starting to find where all of this is. It seems to be in very specific cells. It seems to be at the molecular level. It seems to be at the quantum level. But now this is a fringe thing to say because all this research is so new and so recent, and in the previous video I was talking about this. Is it a quantum woo or is it a quantum reality what we're talking about here? So all these theories of consciousness saying that it is about information. I mean, it's about the quantum information. That is where consciousness is stored. Can we still see it? Can we open a brain and see this quantum information? No, we don't have the technology to do this. This mystery, it goes on with the article itself goes into it. So this mystery is known as the hard problem of consciousness. It is such a difficult problem that until a couple of decades ago, only philosophers discussed it, and even today, although we have made huge progress in our understanding of neuroscientific basis of consciousness, still there is no adequate theory that explains what consciousness is and how to solve this hard problem. So they're saying here, only philosophers discuss this issue of consciousness. But now, we have the neuroscientific basis, but now we have scientists joining with philosophers and offering a new idea of it. And we have other scientists which are just going straight into it and saying, we're talking about information. So this is the hard problem of consciousness. One thing is the neural activity, one thing is what the MRI shows, what the magnetoencephalography shows, another thing is the subjective experience. The color red is the brands of ketchup, is our mental images. Now, one thing that I want to say is, just to put everything into perspective, is that what we're doing here, what neuroscientists and what philosophers are doing when we're studying consciousness right now, is we are reverse engineering technology that we cannot understand. I'm gonna repeat this. We are reverse engineering technology we don't understand. What does this even mean? We are functional beings. We have all these things in our bodies, but we have no idea how they work. We're born into it. There's a name for this principle. There's a name for this philosophy that it cannot come to my brain right now. But this is one of the arguments of creation, of the existence of something larger. How can we, as advanced and as we are science, we have science, we know everything. How are we reverse engineering technology? What means is that we did not create the human body. We inhabit the human body. We did not create it. We're starting to understand technology that was not created by us. We are aliens into these bodies, and we don't know the nature of reality. We don't know the nature of the cycles. We don't know the nature of life and death. We don't know what lies beyond that. We don't know why. We don't know how. We don't know where. We're starting to make observations, we're starting to make experiments, we're starting to understand how things work, but we are reverse engineering this technology that we don't understand. On a higher perspective, where does that place us? Who are we? Where are we? We're aliens inhabiting technology that we don't understand. Perhaps in the future we'll be able, when we solve this problem of consciousness, it's gonna be when we are able to open a brain and have the technology to go into the microtubules, as the Orkoar theory, which I already linked, or I'm gonna link, or you can find it below, from Burns and Hameroff. When we can go into the microtubules and open them and look at this quantum information, and through some sort of software or technology, we're gonna look into the mental images of another person. That's when we are gonna solve the problem of consciousness. As so far as we have any sort of reports or indication that another human being can experience another human being's qualia, consciousness experience, this subjective experience, is through near-death experiences. What near-death experiences are saying is that when people die, they can go into the experiences of their lives. They can travel in time, even if you want to call it that. They can travel in time and go to experience in their lives and perceive and feel and look at an experience from another person's point of view, and feel what they felt and see what they saw. This is the only account of a being experiencing another being's qualia or consciousness, which is something very interesting, and I'm going to be talking about that in the future. Alright, so the article continues. Dr. Lahab and Dr. Nimi recently published a new physical theory in the journal Frontiers in Psychology that claims to solve the hard problem of consciousness in a purely physical way. As I said, you can find the link below. It's this actual research, and what they did is they managed to put together philosophy, some very complex philosophical assumptions with equations, so it's the work of a philosopher and a physicist, to sort of go into the nuts and bolts of how consciousness works, how we have these two things in consciousness, which is the subjective experience and the physical aspect of it, which is the neural activity, the synapses, and all of that brain activity, and then there's the subjective idea. So they make a lot of very strange assumptions with artificial intelligence and so on and so forth. It's quite complicated, as I said. Anybody can go through it, but the main thing that they are doing, according to the authors, when we change our assumption about consciousness and assume that it is a relativistic phenomenon, the mystery of consciousness naturally dissolves. In the paper, the researchers developed a conceptual mathematical framework to understand consciousness from a relativistic point of view. According to Dr. Lahab, the lead author of the paper, consciousness should be investigated with the same mathematical tools that physicists use for other known relativistic phenomena. So, so if we go quickly into what is relativistic, what does this relativistic phenomenon means, it's pretty basic. Just a very basic idea of what relativism is. It's a family of philosophical views which deny claims to objectivity within a particular domain and assert the valuations in that domain are relative to the perspective of an observer or the context in which they are assessed. So it's not objective. it's subjective. This is what they're saying. So this is how they solve the issue of consciousness. The big problem of consciousness, what they're saying is, well, it's not a physical thing, it's not an objective thing, it's a subjective thing. Done. Problem is gone. It's not. This is a very good I'm gonna go into why this is such a good contribution to the whole research on consciousness. But did they solve the problem? I don't think so. I think this is a little bit more of why did it to make it a little bit more approachable for people. Alright, so I have like another 20 minutes of footage of me going into the actual research and going into some of the examples provided in the article. But given that I do not really disagree with the conclusion of the experiment or the theories are, and they are quite complex, it might be a little bit confusing for some people. So if anybody is really interested in going into this, the link is below. You can go into the actual article, into the actual study, and look at the equations, look at the assumptions, look at the syllogisms. They use very, very complex assumptions to present this idea of consciousness. It almost feels and seems like they were trying to convince a very materialistic person into their point of view, to make them understand that you simply cannot reduce consciousness to a physical phenomenon. And how they do this is they do a lot of assumptions. They say things like, if we had some zombie-like creature who had neural activity but did not have any actual conscious experience, and they use the example of Bob and Alice, and this example is actually used in the article, but they do not explain in the article that Alice stands for artificial intelligence, something, consciousness, prospect, something, and they do these types of assumptions where what if Alice had neural activity but she didn't have any conscious phenomenon, any subjective consciousness to her. Would she be conscious, and so on and so forth. A lot of assumptions. The most basic one is that they compare the study of consciousness with velocity. If we had two individuals, Bob and Alice, Bob was to get into a train, and we wanted to calculate the velocity of Bob. The velocity of Bob would be different from the perspective of Alice, who would watch Bob depart, than from the perspective of Bob, who would be stationary inside the train. So in the actual objective world, there is not a simple definition of the velocity of Bob. It depends on the perspective, whether of Alice or Bob. They're saying that consciousness is the same thing. And now, as I said, they go into very complex ideas, but I made it very simple. And the way that I see it, and I offer a couple of other examples, is you cannot open a brain and pull out a mental image. You cannot open a brain and feel another person's emotions. It just does not work like that. We can only see the relationship, we can only see the association of the neural activity with what the person is feeling if we ask the person, if the person shares their subjective experience, like Dr. Nime states in the article. This is one of the first instances where I've seen a physicist, a scientific theory on how consciousness is not a physical phenomenon. So as I said all throughout this video, what does that tell us? It opens the door to start going into the metaphysical. Well, if it's not in the physical realm, then where is it? What is it? And now in philosophy, in the reports, in the studies, we have a lot of insight into the metaphysical, or what might be the metaphysical. So I think this is a huge contribution. And now, as more of these types of experiments or theories keep coming forward, even this very single one, scientists are gonna have to go through it, gonna have to go through the equations, make a counter argument, and they're not gonna get away with saying, oh, it's just a physical process and that's it, because now there is a counter argument to that. And as we keep going and digging into the metaphysical aspect of consciousness and everything attached to the study of consciousness relating to near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, psychedelics, the UFO phenomenon, etc., we can see that it is crystal clear what's going on. It is consistent, and there is something that we're barely beginning to understand. As it is said in this article, in this research, now we can get the aid of philosophy to aid us with all of this, because we simply do not have the scientific technology to prove all these things, to do all these things. And now this is something that, as I mentioned, I want to do with the outline, offer a more pragmatic philosophy when overlapping all everything, ancient philosophies, reports, anecdotal data, with the studies, with the science. We can approach, at least get closer to a more accurate look into what reality might be. And the good news is that this reality seems very positive. There seems to be something much larger and much more complex than any of our philosophies, our fantasies, and even our scientific theories have even begun to grasp. If you're on the path of finding the truth about reality and our purpose as humans on Earth, the information that I have to share concerns you. After a lifetime of research in philosophies ranging from Buddhism to the occult, I've encountered themes and patterns along some baffling information that is beginning to be seriously studied by science. A Rational Divine Outline, The Ghost of Jesus, is the first iteration of this project, where I analyze the message of Jesus without dogmatism, fanaticism, or religious bias. You can find my work available on Amazon on the link below. If you find this work valuable, consider subscribing, sharing, and following me on social media, as it'll help others in the same path to find this information. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.